Now, despite reported successes in combating terrorism within its borders, Nigeria's military has witnessed a decline in the latest global military rankings, dropping 3 places. According to the 2024 Global Firepower Report, Nigeria's armed forces are now ranked 39th out of 145 countries, down from 36th in 2003 and 35th in 2022, I should say. That's 2023, 36th, and 2022, of course, 35th. Nigeria also slipped from 3rd to 4th place in Africa as Egypt retained its position as the continent's strongest military, followed by Algeria and South Africa. Nigeria is at the bottom of the radar now in terms of helicopter carrier fleet strength by country, tanker fleet strength by country, destroyer fleet strength by country, naval corvette fleet strength by country, submarine fleet strength, and reserve military strength. According to the report, over 60 factors were considered to determine the rankings, including military units, financial standing, logistical capabilities, and geography. Meanwhile, Egypt retained its position as Africa's strongest military, followed by Algeria and South Africa. I did say that before. Now, globally, the United States retained the top spot for the 18th consecutive year. Other global powers such as Russia, China, India, and South Korea rounded out the top 5. Now, on the positive side, Nigeria performed well in total available manpower, population fit for service, and paramilitary strength. The report follows news of the attack on an army base in Sabongida, Damboa in Borno State, that's northeast Nigeria, which resulted in the death of 6 soldiers. Now, commiserating with the military over the loss, President Tinubu has directed authorities to further probe the unfortunate incident and ensure that it serves as a valuable lesson to prevent similar occurrences. Now, there's been a number of attacks by Boko Haram and ISWAP in recent times in the northeast of the country, leading to fears that the insurgent groups may be on some kind of resurgence. To discuss this further, I'm now being joined on the program by retired Air Vice Marshal Adesonya Olatokunbo, who is a former spokesperson of the Nigerian Air Force. He joins us from Abuja. Thank you very much, Air Vice Marshal, for joining us on the program. Before we talk about the global ranking now, let's talk about some of the recent attacks we have seen, like the attack on that the military base we saw in Damboa, leading to the killing of 6 soldiers. We've seen other attacks. The other day we saw an attack now on the base of the civilian JTF and all of that. Is this some kind of resurgence of Boko Haram and ISWAP? Because for a long time now, they had not been able to carry out attacks of this nature.
Okay, let me start by thanking you for inviting me to this program today. The attacks are very unfortunate and certainly not what any well-meaning Nigerian desires. Like you rightly said, for some time there has been some quiet, and that's indicative apparently of the so much damage that the military, the Nigerian military that is, has been able to bring to bear on the insurgents. And clearly what we are seeing is an attempt by the insurgents to, in a way, demonstrate their relevance. Clearly, I want to believe that it's not impossible that because it's been quiet, that the Nigerian military too had been somewhat maybe relaxed, and I think the insurgents also took advantage of this to try to bring upon them surprise attacks. But it's also gladdening to note that despite the surprise nature, that the Nigerian military was able to really come up immediately, and they were able to foil the attack, as we've been told.
Now, let's also talk about, not quite long ago, just recently, the Oyo State Governor, Seyi Makinde, raised an alarm of terrorists from the north of the country, whether northeast or northwest now, coming over to the west, especially Oyo State. And, of course, there had been a Security Council meeting, and the security agency is promising to fortify the borders and ensure that these terrorists do not gain ground at all in Oyo State or anywhere in the southwest of the country. But tell me, how serious is that alarm raised by the governor, and why should we be concerned?
Well, every security report should not be taken lightly because everything sometimes starts small and more often than not eventually grows bigger than one expects. But clearly, I want to believe that whatsoever is happening in the northwest and the northeast at this point might be difficult to replicate in the southwest.
Why did you say so?
Okay. More often than not, focus is on the kinetic aspect of the operations, and which is why more often than not what we've been doing is trying to bear upon the terrorists our military might. But the important thing to note is the root cause of the situation. We have the non-kinetic factors has been very important. Issues of illiteracy, poor health care, poverty, unemployment, and even in some cases some cultural beliefs as well as ungoverned spaces. These are very, very critical factors that prevail at this point in time in the northwest, in some parts of the northwest and the northeast. And I think Oyo State will not exactly have that same situation with those regions.
But then these are terrorists from the north that are coming to the south. Isn't that a problem?
Well, of course, like I said from the beginning, every security report should not be taken lightly. And yes, there might be reports that they are coming, but I believe that our armed forces and other security agencies are well able to stop them in their tracks.
Do you think, considering the geography of the south and the southwest in particular, do you think these terrorists would find it very easy to operate in this kind of environment, an environment that they are not so very much used to? Or that they may have collaborators on ground?
Well, the nature of insurgency is such that they will always have collaborators in form of civilian informants and the rest, which is why all hands must be on deck to ensure that they are not able to grow into any formidable force. But I think our geography in the southwestern part of Nigeria is more of an advantage in this case, and I think it will be disadvantageous to the insurgents and the terrorists to operate within the areas of Oyo State.
Why did you say so? What exactly would be the disadvantage for them?
If you check down in the southwest, and if you also compare with the northeast and the northwest, the geographies are quite different. Then we also have a situation where we have the borders. That's our borders with Chad, with Niger, also close to the northwest and northeast. More often than not, and from all indications, they get their resupply, especially for arms, through those borders. And so which means logistics resupply will certainly be an issue for them. And when it comes to warfare, a critical element will always be logistics resupply, because that will determine their ability to sustain themselves in battle.
But why is it very important that authorities do not allow these terrorists gain any foothold at all in the south of the country?
Oh, it is very, very important, because up till this moment, one of the things that we've been able to say is the fact that these operations are limited to specific areas in the country. But if they are able to get any form of foothold in the southwest, then it becomes very unfortunate. So it's important that everything that could be done should actually be done to ensure that we do not have the kind of thing that's happening in the northwest and the northeast rearing its ugly head in the southwest.
Now let's go back to that global military ranking. Any surprise for you at all? Nigeria ranked 4th in Africa now.
Well, it might not totally come as a surprise, and I will speak from experience. You know, these rankings, like you rightly said, are based on about 60 factors, categorized into about 7 major ones. One of them, which I think you left out, is also financing. So, but let's look at the issue of manpower. Clearly, we've been given some kudos in the area of manpower.
I'm surprised. I'm actually surprised that you know, the report gave us some credit. You know, saying we're doing well in terms of manpower, because before now I had thought our manpower was low.
Well, it's not enough, but it's not to say that it is low. But when you compare it with other African countries, it's certainly high. And then don't forget that the way global firepower does its ranking, it also includes the paramilitary forces, not just the military forces. It includes the paramilitary forces as part of the personnel available. But I want to speak more about the equipment holding, which is also critical, as I'm looking at the number of fighter aircraft, looking at the number of attack vessels, looking at the number of armored tanks, vessels, and the rest. Now, we've seen that in the past few years, Nigeria has made a lot of effort to acquire new aircraft, new fighter aircraft, vessels, armored tanks, and the rest. But the challenge is these equipment are never bought off the shelf. So, when Nigeria makes a decision to buy, it has to wait first for the payment to be made, which, following our own normal bureaucracy, will take its time. And after it's been made, sometimes you have the waiting period being about 2 years. You'll notice from a recent report from the Air Force that of the 64 aircraft being expected, they were able to receive 14 in 2024. So
that's true.
Ordinarily, Nigerians will imagine that, well, if we've bought this much, because the reports usually give an impression that the moment we say we're acquiring, then we've already acquired, which is not the case. So that is on one side. The other critical issue is finance. You'll also note that Algeria and Egypt, not in that order though, are ahead of Nigeria in that ranking. The budget that's available to those countries for defense and security is much higher compared with Nigeria. In 2024, Algeria, Egypt, and Morocco were higher than Nigeria. And citing an instance from when I was the defense advisor of Nigeria in Moscow, there was a time Egypt was buying in one deal about 30 Su-35 multi-role aircraft, fighter aircraft. That deal was worth about $2 billion. About the same time, that was in 2019, Algeria was buying a total of 30 aircraft also. I think 14 MiG-29, as well as 16 Su-30 aircraft, also worth about $2 billion. About the same time, Nigeria had, just a few years before then, signed a contract with the same Russia to procure 12 Mi-35M helicopters. And the best Nigeria could do, due to budgetary limitations, was to pay for 2 at a time. So at the end of the day, we were able to buy 5. We paid for 2, another 2, and a 5th one. Until date, 7 are still hanging. So if Egypt and Algeria are buying at a time 30 aircraft, and Nigeria is buying 2. So it doesn't matter how much more we are spending on defense, as long as we are not spending enough, certainly there is a likelihood that our ranking will drop.
And the irony is that a lot of people think we spend so much on our military. You look at the budget for this year, for instance, the defense budget is the highest. But then when you place that against what other countries are spending, I mean, some of these countries you have actually mentioned, it pales into insignificance.
It does, surely. And even looking at the budget, I also think it's important to look at the fact that our defense budget is not focused on the acquisition of equipment alone. It's actually meant to take care of recurrent expenditure. So it includes salaries, schools, everything under the Ministry of Defense. So, but when you look at that figure, it appears huge. Well, like I did give an example recently. As to operate, let's say the Alpha Jet aircraft, which I happen to be interpreted on, I'm an Alpha Jet aircraft maintenance engineer. That aircraft will take about 2,520 liters of Jet A1 for each mission. And then this particular Jet A1 is burnt in less than 2 hours in most cases. So, how much does this one cost? On the average, over 1,000 naira per liter. And I want to imagine that if we take about 6 sorties in a day, that's we have either 6 Alpha Jet aircraft flying once a day, or maybe one flying 6 times a day, which is quite the usual case. So you are going to imagine that at the end of 52 weeks, we will have been spending over 25 billion naira on the Jet A1 of Alpha Jet.
And that's just on alone. Jet A1 alone?
One Jet A1 alone. Not the ammo. For example, it carries rockets, about 36 rockets. Each one costs $3,500. And imagine how many rockets are fired during missions. There are some bombs that are procured by the Nigerian Air Force that are upwards of $120,000 for one bomb. So when you look at this field, and we have not even talked about maintenance, spare parts. So we have not talked about uniform, we have not talked about other aircraft types. And so what happens? What happens is that that figure that we actually think is so high is far from being high.
Well, that's what can I say? But is there a correlation between this, poor spending now? Is there a correlation between that and our inability, for instance, to bring, say, the Boko Haram insurgency to a complete end? And these bandit operations we have across the country, across the north.
Can you take that again, please?
Yeah, I said, is there a correlation between this, lack of adequate equipment for our military now and our inability to end the Boko Haram insurgency and probably end banditry across the north of the country as well?
The correlation is not total. Now, like I did say, at best, what the military will do is to look at the kinetic aspect of the operation. And I've once said that it's more like treating the symptoms rather than the illness itself. So if you look at the way the situation is in the northwest and even in the northeast, several victories have been claimed by the armed forces of Nigeria against the terrorists. And I'm aware from the days when I was in the military that truly several of the terrorist insurgents have been decimated, killed. But then they keep recruiting. Why is it easy for them to recruit? Issues of unemployment, issues of poverty, issues of ungoverned spaces. So, which means that to solve this problem once and for all, we need an all-of-government approach, which will go beyond just the military aspect, but will also include efforts at creating employment, tackling poverty, and the rest of the non-kinetic issues. And one other critical element of the fight against insurgency is information operations. The terrorists rely on disinformation and misinformation as part of their own strategy towards victory. Don't forget that victory for them is not in their ability to overrun a base. Victory for them is their ability to cause embarrassment to the government of the day. And what does it take to cause embarrassment? maybe going to an isolated village and killing unfortunate Nigerians there. Once this is done, then of course the government is embarrassed, and it's a form of victory for them. Beyond that, they also seek to tell all forms of lies, propaganda, as a way of also doing what? As a way of striking terror into the hearts of the civilian populace. And once they're able to do this, it's victory for them. So it's why, from my days as a spokesman of the Nigerian Air Force, said it's important also that the media comes on board and is actually really patronized by government agencies as a way of ensuring that this information operations is taken right into the heart of the insurgents, while also doing everything possible not to propagate the misinformation and disinformation from the terrorists and insurgents.
Now, just before I let you go, as a former senior Air Force personnel yourself, what do you think in terms of equipment now? How much, for instance, in terms of aircraft, do you think the Nigerian Air Force would need that will become the game changer for the Air Force and then make us even much stronger?
That is a subjective question. I actually believe that when I looked at the budget for 2 years ago, I think talking about 2022, and I compare with 23 and 24, you've seen that there's been an upsurge. I'm only hoping that the focus is also on acquiring equipment, the necessary equipment. And but one of the areas I think we should be investing in a lot towards fighting this insurgency is in unmanned aerial vehicles.
Okay.
Both the the unmanned aerial vehicles, both the armed ones and the ones that will be used for surveillance. We should invest adequately in them. And in addition, we should also invest in quite a number of helicopters too, because they are more needed in this type of
and all of this equipment don't come cheap at all.
They do not come cheap at all. But the thing I always, or the question I always ask is, if we look at the cost of funding the military, if we look at the cost of fighting terrorism has been too high, then we can always ask ourselves the question, what is the cost of insecurity?
Quite an important question, no doubt. Quite an important question. I want to thank you very much, Air Vice Marshal Adesanya Olatukumbo, retired and former spokesperson of the Nigerian Air Force. Thank you very much for coming on the program, and thank you for shedding light on this very important issue. Thanks for your time, sir. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back. Stay with us, don't go away.
Opinions are free, facts are sacred, but truth is universal.
How, in practical terms, can we, for instance, de-escalate the tension?
When you go into public office, you must be ready to answer to the people.
We know where the enemy is. 3 places. The Lake Chad Basin, the border area between Nigeria and Cameroon, and then the Sambisa Forest.
On DEJI360, we give you a complete dose of everything. Opinion, facts, and undiluted truth.
I hardly believe what politicians are saying in this part of the world.
A new Nigeria is possible, a future is possible.
We delve into the issues, dissect it so that you can understand it, and use it to take action.
I don't think there's any need for any governor to look for grant for ranching.
DEJI360, dissecting the issues.